Scientists and diplomats are not obvious bedfellows. I'm a trained molecular cell biologist, and people always thought that I spent all my time in a white coat, alone with a microscope, never leaving my lab and publishing in obscure journals. But of course, that's not really true. To be fair, I had my own preconceptions about diplomats. I associated diplomacy with deception. As Winston Churchill once said, diplomacy is the art of telling people to go to hell in such a way that they ask for directions. Of course, that's not true either. It was only after my PhD, when I worked at the United Nations, that I realized that diplomacy is actually a process that aims to prevent conflict and sustain peace, and can help nations work productively together to benefit all. I realize it's an essential part of the way countries interact. And even though I was the only science PhD in my office, I saw that every issue the UN worked on required scientific input.
I started out as an engineer conducting research in industry, and then moved from Silicon Valley to Washington, D.C. to serve in the U.S. State Department as a AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellow. I learned that while science and diplomacy are different, it isn't because of simple stereotypes. Conducting diplomacy does differ in some ways from conducting research. For one thing, the timescale for action and research is long. Publishing a paper can take years. On the other hand, in diplomacy, the timescale for action can be very short. Sometimes even a few hours are required just to put together a briefing paper. In research, you also have to rely on a lot of information being available. Experimentation is central to your job. In diplomacy, you might not have all the full information given in a situation. Information is not always reliable, and experimentation is certainly not an option. But there are some important things that science and diplomacy have in common, like an analytical approach and the importance of trust and relationships.
We both also learn firsthand the ways that science and diplomacy not only benefit, but need each other. Let's be clear for a moment. When we use the word science in this course, we include all the natural and social sciences, as well as engineering and mathematics. In terms of science diplomacy, we are also using science to not only refer to scientific research, but also science education and all the other elements of the scientific enterprise. Science requires access to people, places, funding, and resources. And those are things diplomacy can help support. So what do we mean when we say diplomacy?
You might be thinking of government representatives, such as foreign ministers, ambassadors, and other professional diplomats negotiating international treaties. But this is only part of what diplomacy is. Official diplomats are representatives of government who are authorized to make decisions on behalf of their nation. But diplomacy can also, and increasingly does, involve non-state actors, such as NGOs, universities, civil society groups, and private companies. In this course, we'll deal with all of these levels of diplomacy. And in fact, diplomacy is any interaction that affects the broader relationship between nations and societies.
Science is a process for pursuing answers. And diplomacy is a process for dialogue and cooperation between countries and citizens. By integrating the two, we can face challenges and take every opportunity to advance humanity.